Brian Claypool. And you won the case. Thank you for joining us on From the Halls of Justice. We're back in this TV station with Judge Rudolph Diaz. He's here with us again. And thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
We're talking about the welfare of children in and out of the courtroom. And Ronald Litz from the Sunset Strip is here with us with his fabulous self. And he is going to lead us again with the interview with Judge Diaz. We got really involved in our last conversation and the time went by like that. So, go ahead.
So, I wonder, as a judge, when you make decisions and then you have to deal with the parties again and you see that the person who you gave the children to may not have, done the right things, how does that make you feel? Are you able to let it go and forget about it, or do you have emotional problems with these decisions?
Well, we know we're dealing with people, and it's people dealing with people, so there's no perfect science to this. There are standards, there are legal standards that guide us, and they give judges some discretion. And only experience, both in law as a lawyer and on the bench, and in personal life experiences, it all comes together, and it's all very human. We can make wrong decisions, and we don't want to do that. And so we try to look at every case as honestly as we can, and we rely on the social workers to present us investigations that go in and focus on the issues that brought the case to us. We rely on the lawyers for their advocacy, recognizing that is their advocacy. But the understanding is that we're here to focus on the welfare of the children. And sometimes lawyers can't get away from their role as an advocate. And so that's up to me, as a judge, and all judges, of course, to start figuring out, and that's why we have the attorneys for the children too, because that brings us back. And at one time, there were no attorneys for children. It was just the department making their recommendations, and they advocated for the children. Then it became somewhat apparent that children are even more unique in their interests, and the department has its interests as well, that sometimes is in conflict with what's the best for the children. They don't sometimes do what they're supposed to do. They don't see the children as often. They don't make sure that the problems that come up in school. We're looking at how the children are in school, whether or not they need other resources, mental health services, whether or not they need to see their family. I mean, that part of the reunification process, and that's usually 1 year that we focus on, but it could be 2 years, is that we really are trying to make sure that the families are coming together as we proceed in the case, to make sure that they are visiting. Occasionally, we make efforts to have children visit parents who are incarcerated, or they're in treatment or somewhere else in foster care. And when, as I mentioned before, sometimes children are placed outside the county. That becomes a really difficult process to be able to make sure that there are visitations occurring.
Is that because they don't have some immediate family that will take them?
That's number one.
Okay.
And number two, there are
parents.
foster care available.
Okay.
There is a shortage of foster care parents in Los Angeles County. We have over 25,000 children that we're responsible for in our system, and I believe it's somewhere in the close to 10,000 that are in foster care. So that's a lot of homes, and the other. The other thing is that we want to keep children together, and if there's 3 or 4, there aren't too many homes who are willing to take 3 or 4 children. A lot of the homes already have their own children, and they just are willing to take in other children to help out. So it's hard to keep those children. And then we rely on the foster care parent to make sure the visits occurring between the siblings. So it's not just visits with the parents, it's visits with the children as well. And we have to be sensitive to all of that. And to get back to your question, when you don't make the right decision, well, I'm relying on the social worker reports. I'm relying on the attorneys to act as advocates for their clients, but also for the best interest of the children.
How often, what percentage of the reunification cases work where the parents get reunified with the
Well,
children?
I wish I could give you the exact percentage. I'm not sure what that percentage is, but the great majority will remain with the parents. For example, even if a petition is filed, and we may remove the children from both parents, we may remove the children from one parent, we may not remove them from either parent if they're not living together, for example, or even if they are, there may be just some inability to handle a child, for example. You know, you get a child who's like a young teenager, just unruly, and that they just can't do anything with the child, so the child comes into the system. And we're trying to avoid filing criminal charges. So we're trying to, and we're seeing a decrease in the filings and delinquency. And instead of delinquency, they're filing in the dependency side to avoid putting them into a criminal experience, penal institution of some kind, or juvenile hall or something that's more penal. So we'll try to take them into the foster care system, and we could place them with parents, or we could replace them with relatives, or we could place them with friends of the family. Non-relative placements, we call them, but close friends. And then there could be strangers. Of course, the last resort is the strangers. But I think they do a good job. I think a lot of the foster care parents, they're trained as well, and their heart is into it. They're really trying to help these children. And the younger they are, the better chances, of course, for the parents, the foster care parents, to want to adopt them or keep them indefinitely. And so there's always a chance, if you make an immediate decision that you think and ultimately was not the right decision, you still have an opportunity to repair the situation. It's when you terminate jurisdiction. So even though we're returning, everything seems to be good enough to return the kids to the parents, we will maybe spend another 6 months supervising the family, and if need be, we'll extend it while parents are completing programs that they haven't completed, whether it's domestic violence programs or whether it's just counseling, drug treatment. And just we'll sort of watch the case because we find it necessary, is the language, to keep the case open. But then we come to a point where we say, well, there's nothing more that we should do at this time, and we'll terminate the court's jurisdiction.
Will you sometimes order monitored visitation when you give the kids?
Well, that is when we detain a child, and most likely the visitations, which are always ordered in every case, are going to be monitored. The question, who monitors, and should the parents visit jointly? May the offending parent be allowed to visit in the family home? And usually that's not. Can they visit in a neutral setting, or should they be visited only in the DCFS office? And so there are different degrees and different ways to, or do the foster care parents monitor the visits, or a family member who's been screened and qualified to serve as a monitor. And so the visitations come in different ways, but visitation is a very important part of the reunification process.
What makes you qualified as a monitor?
Well, it's not a whole lot. Everything, as I said, it's all human beings, and you can pick the wrong monitor. But there is there are people in the department, social children and family services, who train to screen monitors. We check their backgrounds to see if they have any, if they've ever been in the system themselves, if they've been arrested, if they have any drug problems or anything like that. And as soon as we get somebody whose limited role in this whole process is to monitor the visits, then it could be a mistake, and it has been a mistake. They were not the right persons to monitor. In fact, it was all a kind of a setup where the parent chose this person who's a family member. It could be a brother or it could be a mother to monitor the visits, and then you find out later on that they really weren't monitoring. They just stepped away, and then of course then you have to take action. You have to now remove that person as a monitor and find another monitor, and those things do happen.
So there are professional monitors, people where that's what their job is. They get hired to monitor, and there are other times when the court will feel it's okay if the grandmother or a good friend of the family will be there as a monitor, but it's a little different.
We don't use professionals in the the dependency system until we terminate the case. And when we terminate the case, we'll issue a family law order, which will give custody to one parent or both or whatever. And if one is still monitoring, we will if they can agree to on a monitor, that's fine. If they can't, then we say as an alternative a professional monitoring service and then you describe who pays for it, whether the father or the mother or they share. But again, ultimately, it's continued contact between the parents.
In some of your dependency court cases, do you have parents who say, I want to give up my child, put him up for adoption? Does that happen, and are you able
it happens.
to do that?
What's interesting is you've heard of this program, I forgot what they actually call it, but it's surrendering your child. We don't get a lot of those cases, but they do happen. And it usually is the best thing, and it's usually a difficult, but you have to respect the parent who says that. It's a tough decision to make. You know, you leave the child at the hospital, or you immediately take the child to a police officer or the fire department, and what makes it difficult is that you never know who the father is, because the child is just left there, and it's a difficult thing for the child later on to also to comprehend.
Sure.
But these children who are left and abandoned, if you will, at the very early age, have a better chance of being adopted than the older children.
Right. Yes.
So there's a good chance they're going to be adopted. And then later on, even parents will, after they've had their children for a while, come into the court and say, I don't want to reunify with my children, I just don't want to do this anymore. And that's tragic. And because the children are old enough to understand somewhat what's going on. And then actually, by default, a lot of parents, when they're ordered to a case plan, to go to counseling, to go to drug treatment, and they don't do it, they just walk away from it all. That's another form of saying, I don't want services, I don't want the responsibility of my children. And some of them really are incapable of being parents because of their strong addiction and their lifestyle.
Yes.
I mean, they did the best thing for the children, actually, because they were never going to be good parents.
Well, right now, what I'm seeing, and this is a carryover from our previous show, is unfortunately there's a generation that's growing up that they're living in their cars at this time because as minimum wage is being increased to $15 an hour, that hasn't happened yet in the Los Angeles area. However, people that are making $10, $11, and $12 an hour, they can't afford the rents. And if you're paying $1,600 a month, or you're paying $2,200 a month, or if you're paying $3,000 a month, you can't pay that off of $12 and $13 an hour. Actually, you can't pay that off of $15 an hour. And I notice now that more and more people, unfortunately, these kids, if they're not renting a room, they are growing up. They're living in their cars. That's what they're doing. They're living in their cars, and it just really breaks my heart. I don't know who to address
It
that.
will make the world a crazier world.
Well, it's something quite similar to what you say. First of all, we do have the cases that you just mentioned where they are homeless. They're living in in a corner somewhere. But there are some who will move from home to home, depending on who will open their doors to them. But it's almost like homeless, and sometimes it is. They do live in their cars, but they are never stable, and stability is a very important factor for children to experience. I mean, that's how they thrive. Children, they got to be in the home, they got to be in the same school, they got to have the same friends. This just makes them more likely to succeed in life when there's a lot of stability. But when you're moving from home to home or tent to tent or whatever it is that you're doing, and these children don't know, that's just the way they think it is.
But stability is so important for children.
Absolutely.
To have the same friends, the same teachers, the same place. It's just a shame.
It gives them the opportunity to develop in many other areas. They don't have to be worried about where am I going to sleep tonight or eat today, or my mom, my dad, or where's my home, and they can start thinking about being artistic, sports, whatever it is, another interest that they have, travel or something like that.
The 13-year-old, the one that's your birthday, she has a birthday with you. She, when they first came to our church, she liked to draw, and so I got her a little Etch-a-Sketch this weekend. I don't even know if they still make Etch-a-Sketches. I told her, I said, this might be obsolete in a few years. Keep it, and maybe you can sell it for something. But I got her a little Etch-a-Sketch, and they used to. I find myself, I would ask them when they haven't been with me for a day or so, and I'll say, how are you doing? Did you eat today? And I will notice, day 1, day 2, by day 2 or 3, we're back in sync. They're all comfortable. But sometimes, the oldest one is the lead, and she'll say, oh, yeah, we ate. And then one night, the little baby was sleepy, and she woke up and she said she had a tummy ache. And I'm like, what's wrong? Was the food too hard? She goes, I didn't eat. And I thought, okay, did you eat or didn't you eat? Well, let's feed you, So, stability is very, very, very important. And I don't know, they just steal your hearts, and I just pray for them. But I thank God for you. I thank you so much for bringing this to the light. And something else you mentioned, which is they need more Spanish-speaking therapists. So with that being said, I think we have some fabulous Spanish-speaking attorneys.
Yes.
But
that's a new route for graduates to go, would be in therapy for the course.
Absolutely, it is. Oh, there's tremendous amount of need, and people who are thinking about it, want a career that they think they have interest in. That's a great area, is therapy. And that whole industry is also constantly expanding and developing. We need a lot.
Another thing to remember is just because a child has this situation, has to be in dependency court, has parents who aren't interested, or they go into foster homes, it doesn't mean that they are going to turn out poorly or not amount to something.
Absolutely.
And one of my dearest friends had that situation where he went from foster homes and didn't even finish high school, and wound up being a great person, Vidal Sassoon. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So,
well, that is really part of the rewards that we'll experience later on with some of these kids. They will have been in the foster care system almost their entire young lives, and it used to be when you turned 18, they said you're on your own, and yet, and that was another thing that I observed when I was a young judge, that they were letting these kids out of the system at 18, and 18 is still very young, and you still can't do a lot. You don't know, you don't have a job, you don't even know how to apply to college if you want to go to college, and you don't have any connections, and many times you need parents or someone to either motivate you or help you fill out those applications. And how to make decisions about going to college. But what we do now is, in the recent bill that came out, but we were finding ways to do it even before the bill came out. It's called AB 12. We've extended services to people who have been in the foster care system until they're 21. Mm-hmm. And what's great about it is as when the kids are about 17, 18, and they know 18 is just around the corner, and it's time to start making decisions about my future, because I could be out the system, but we encourage them to stay in the system for an additional 3 years. But they have to be in school, and some of them haven't finished high school yet. They have to be working on a trade, or they have to be in an appropriate home, or working at least part-time. But they have to focus on some objective, acceptable objective, to remain. And you get paid. You get an allowance to do that, and put you in a home that's willing to and it's not as strict as when you're placed in foster care. It isn't necessarily a foster care home. It's a home where somebody will let you stay with them, but they have an income now from the county, as well as income from their job or they're going to school. And we see some fabulous stories of just kids going away to Colombia, and other places like that. We keep them in the system, so they're entitled and to some financial assistance. But other people who have drawn an interest in these things come forward and help the children with scholarship money, full rides for 4 years. And to see these kids who, now adults, these young people who had gone through the system where the odds were so incredibly large that they were not going to succeed. In fact, when I first drew an interest I was about on the bench for 2 years, and I was going through making those observations about why kids are here. I remember the Board of Supervisors reported that most of the kids in the foster care system would not finish high school, would be incarcerated, would be on drugs, and would be homeless. And that's the way it was. And we just had to, and I say it's why it's a better system. We started realizing that you just can't cut them off at 18. I mean, you just can't say, here's a couple $100 and now you're on your own.
They're supposedly an adult, but they're not. They're not.
I mean, because they have been fighting the system themselves as kids. They're rebelling. And now they're 17 years old, and they realize, now I really got to get my act together, and it's too late because if they kick you out of the system when you're 18, so they finally get it together, and it's wonderful. You can see how they've opened up their eyes now when they get to 18 and they realize, now I've got to be responsible for my own decisions, and they are making some pretty good decisions.
Well, what happens when the child is 14, and the child at 14, when they start saying, and they may tell you, I want to be with my mother, or I don't want to be, or I want to be with my father. They have, at that age, they basically feel they're in charge. So it may not even matter what you order.
Sure.
They're not necessarily
well,
going
we're dealing
to listen.
with, you've all had 14-year-old kids, and they know everything,
Yes, exactly.
So you're talking about the right age pretty much, and I saw that in delinquency with a 14-year-old kid was coming in, and you're going to see them later on because they're just they're so rebellious, and it's sad, but unless you can really work with them. So no, we have those kids, unfortunately. So those are cases that don't turn out well, and there are children who run away. And it's tragic when they run away, and we can't find them, and we think they're with the parents, but the parents are saying they haven't seen them, and so they may be with the parents. They may be on the streets. They may be involved in sexual trafficking, and that's and we do have that. I mean, we do have young kids, and they're out there somewhere, and we lose them. They're gone. And it's those are the losses. Those are the ones, but there's not much we could have done, except hold them in the delinquency system. But we're getting away from using the delinquency system to correct behaviors for children, unless they're a real threat to the community, a real threat to themselves. So fewer and fewer kids are going in that direction, and we're struggling with this still, with this area where kids come in from other states and cities because they want to come to Hollywood. And so and once they get here, they think everything's going to be okay and it's going to be a lot of fun, and until they realize they've got nothing, and so they become very, very vulnerable to people out there who will exploit them, and there are a lot of children being exploited that way. And when we can, we bring them in, and they just go back, and it goes back, but you just don't quit. When you can, you keep working with them, and sometimes you have to give in to what they want just to get them a little more stable than what they are. For example, we may have found a mother or father unfit to parent this child, but the system has not been able to help this child because the child has gotten traumatized and refuses to cooperate. We'll be cursing out all the social workers, cursing out the teachers. You've heard of these stories, and so sometimes, even though this mother or father is not fit, you might just say, well, let's let them stay there for a while and see if we can stabilize.
Yes.
But to keep them off the streets. Keep them off the streets, because they're out there in the streets, and we do see them. It's tragic.
It is.
Well, I find that acknowledging children is probably one of the best things you can do, because in this lifetime, the only thing we all really want is someone to see us, affirm us, and love us. And so I notice that, when I talk to my girls and I ask about their day and what happened, and the oldest one told me, she said, well, I had a substitute teacher today, and I didn't like her. And I said, well, why not? What happened? And she said, well, she was really mean. We're allowed to get up and go throw our trash in the trash can. And it just so happened that we all had a lot of trash today, and so we were throwing our trash away. I said, really? Sweetheart, you should be very grateful that I was not your substitute teacher, because I don't care. I would have had you sit down. You would have to raise your hand and ask me if you could get up to go to the trash can. Can you imagine, 28, 35 kids, you're trying to have a lesson and teach them, and they're all walking to the trash can, and they knew what they were doing.
Sure they do.
Yeah, I said, you would have had double homework, and she looked at me. I guess all of a sudden her substitute teacher didn't seem so bad. So, but kids are cute. They know who and what they can get away with, and they will try you. And
and they were talking about the same age there. 13, 14-year-old kids. I don't know what it is when you get to that age. I guess just getting into high school or something, and you reach a different level or phase in your life.
And it's so important to take care of the children's health, education, and welfare. That's what we need to do, the courts need to do, the parents must do.
Right. I tell them all the time, I said, you're beautiful young ladies, and be sure, did you brush your teeth? They're very into combing their hair, and they want to use the only thing I have to worry about at the house is the makeup. It's like, stay out of my makeup, but they'll comb their hair, they want to do their makeup. Did you brush your teeth? Did you hang up everything? It's a hard life when you go out in the world and you're a beautiful woman and you've got this gorgeous hair and you smile and you have no teeth. I mean, you don't want to do that, baby, so take care of it. You want to see your dentist, and there are things that you have to do. So they're a lot of fun. It makes you slow down and really take into account what's important. I can shake off a lot of things in my day that happens by the time I get to my girls, and they just tell me life through their eyes. I think the 7-year-old, she's probably going to be a doctor or something. She's really bright, and she has an answer for everything. She'll have questions, but she's got an answer. So I adore her. And but just one of the things, and once again, we're talking about CASA, the Court-Appointed Special Advocates. And if you're interested in becoming a special advocate for the children. The main telephone number is area code 323-859-2888. And if you're in Antelope Valley, the telephone number is area code 661-723-2272. And that's CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocates. And this is for our children, because it really does. It does take a village. You really do need to care. Everybody needs to care. And I don't care if it's my child, your child, just a child, period. They need to be protected, sheltered, loved, and fed, and encouraged to keep their dreams, hold on to their dreams. So I'm so honored to be doing this program with you.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Now, Mr. Litz, you said that now you have been in front of Judge Diaz how many times? 1 minute, 40 seconds. How many times have you been in front of Judge Diaz?
A number of times.
A number of times. So you're very familiar with child custody cases and child support cases?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we can call you sort of a specialty. 50 years?
Yes, it's been a long time.
That's excellent.
But, you know, it's funny in terms of remembering the cases, you know, before. The one judge who was brilliant in that way was Kenneth Black. He still is, but he's a retired judge.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember being in front of him, and I'm making an argument, and he says, "But Mr. Litz, don't you remember 8 years ago in the case of so-and-so where you were representing Mr. Smith?" You know, I could not even remember the case, but you made the opposite argument. I had to tell him that, well, times have changed.
Okay. Things are subject to change. That's right. That is amazing. Well, Judge Diaz.
But Judge Diaz was and is a fabulous judge, and it's so good that he's doing what he's doing now, because the kids and the parents really need your help.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've been on the bench for 34 years?
35.
35 years, all right. Well, these are two men that love what they do, because you can't do something for 35 years and 50 years and not know a little something about what's going on. So I thank you both for being here. Join us next week on From the Halls of Justice. We'll have our fabulous guest, and you'll learn something.
You're finished.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Oh, again, it goes by quick.
Yeah.
And it's just a friendly conversation.
Okay, just in our living rooms on TV, and maybe a few hundred